Good morning, or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Murdock. I'm with Raven SR, and it's a privilege to be here and to be speaking to you. Raven actually has a new technology, or a technology that we've been developing the last couple of years that we were asked to share about. So we'll take a few minutes and look at some of the projects that we're doing and a little bit about our technology. And if you have questions later on, we're in the booth right over there. So, typical legal disclaimer. So Raven's technology actually began back in the 1980s, 1970s by the inventor, who's Dr. Terry Galloway. He was an environmental scientist and was trying to find a better way to eliminate waste. And so he developed a technology that we call steam CO2 reforming and processing waste. And at the time, he was processing that into a hydrogen-rich syngas that was able to be used for generating electricity. But the whole purpose began by how to eliminate waste in the greenest and cleanest way possible. So just a brief overview, because people always ask us about the technology, and so it's worthwhile taking a moment to talk about it. The technology is actually divided into 3 stages. We process pretty much any chemically organic compound. So we can process plastics, biogenics like banana peels. We can process landfill gas, natural gas, plywood. If it's pretty much in your landfill, we can process it. We can't process the metals or the glass, so we like to pull that out. But in general, we'll shred it to about a 10 centimeter outside diameter, and then put it into our first stage reformer, which is essentially a large kiln that externally heats the feedstock and then, if you will, vaporizes it. We do this in a process that's non-combustion, so we exclude all free oxygen from the process so that there will not be any oxygen reaction there. So any chemists in the room, this is kind of reductive chemistry. What that means is we do not produce NOxes or SOxes or particulate matter. Raven is unique in the fact that we don't produce tar or slag, and we don't have coking in the process. From there, the syngas, that raw syngas from the first stage reformer goes to the second stage reformer, where we polish it further, and by the time we're done at that point, we end up with a consistent syngas of about 60% hydrogen, 30% carbon monoxide, more or less regardless of the feedstock. So we process the waste wet, we process the waste mixed, and throughout the process, we end up with a pretty tight syngas quality. And that syngas then becomes the building block of the clean fuel of your choice. So Raven is a clean fuels company. In all our discussions, we approach this from a point of view of what fuel are you looking for, and if you will, what color of fuel, or how green or how low a carbon pathway do you want. If we process biogenic waste, we'll obviously have a carbon negative score. If we process plastic waste, we'll have a carbon elevated score. But really the target is what fuel and how low do you want it to go. The third stage is pretty much a water gas shift. If it's hydrogen, PSA. If we're going into Fischer-Tropsch, we can do sustainable aviation fuel, or methanol, or ammonia, or electricity. So really, once you have that basic building block, you can go in a lot of different directions. So presently, Raven is constructing our first commercial fuels project in Northern California. It has met all permitting. In fact, the health risk assessment has demonstrated that up to 6,000 feet away, actually, we are lowering the impact of the landfill about 2 kilometers away from where the operation will be. We will be processing about 70 tons of green waste at this location and producing 5 tons of transportation grade hydrogen every day. This will have a carbon negative score. And just for what it's worth, we are electrically heated because we're non-combustion. But overall, the entire electric usage is about 25 kilowatts for every kilo of hydrogen that we produce. And that's fully compressed to 500 bar. The other nice thing is we can be right inside a landfill, right inside where the feedstock is. This is only taking up about a hectare of space within the landfill. And so there's a really great synergy between the landfill and the feedstock where they can process it and bring it to us. We are also developing a larger scale system, produce sustainable aviation fuel. This processes about 300 tons of waste a day and will produce about 25 tons or 30 million liters of SAF per year. So it's a nice size. It's a good size just to put into a landfill. Trying to find landfills that actually aggregate more than 1,000 tons of waste a day is not very common. So a distributive model where we can actually produce the fuel closer to where the demand is and closer to where the feedstock is actually helps lower the entire carbon pathway, as well as providing jobs and providing great benefit to the local community. So from the perspective of Raven, there's a lot of good ways to approach processing biomass or waste into a clean fuel. One, we're obviously eliminating waste. We have waste, and as long as humans are on this planet, there will always be waste. On average, every human, in the Western world, is producing somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 kilos of waste a day. So landfills are always developing. Raven can process biosolids as well as whatever's in our landfill. We obviously, by processing the biomass, are avoiding all the emissions that would come off of that landfill. We can be capturing the CO2 and reusing it in other processes, as well as sequestering the actual hard carbon, or what we call a biocarbon, which would be the solid carbon dropping out from the process, as well as producing clean fuels. So about that project that we're doing in Richmond, about 5 garbage trucks per day will produce enough fuel for 97 million miles in a hydrogen car, or 12 million miles in a hydrogen truck Class 8. So you can actually produce quite a bit of fuel from a single landfill. It doesn't have to be a large city. It can be a fairly small town, and you can produce enough fuel right there where people live. The other added advantage that we like to present is the fact that by processing biomass, we're actually eliminating short-lived climate pollutants. As you can see, there's obviously a bigger picture here, and I think we have to be aware of that. We're not just looking for a clean fuel. The reason we're wanting clean fuel is that we want to clean the environment. We want to lower GHGs. We want to make the environment a better place. And so clean fuels is obviously one path there, but by doubling down and processing biomass is another way where we can actually not only have the clean fuels, but eliminate the emissions and the waste that are polluting our planet at the same time. So we can actually accelerate the climate mitigation by processing biomass. So overall, Raven's technology, which as it was developed years ago, actually uses less electricity per kilogram of hydrogen as compared to other technologies. We use no clean water in our process. We do process the waste wet, but that's exactly how it is in the landfill. So we take it anywhere between 20 to 45% moisture content, pretty much what you would find in your kitchen trash can. Sorry. We have far fewer process emissions. We are not gasification, so there is not any of the NOxes or SOxes. Pretty much our only emission is CO2, which can be captured. And even then, we produce fewer CO2 emissions than other technologies that are out there, as well as diverting waste from our landfills. So you're actually providing a tangible solution to your municipalities and your regions, as well as producing a clean fuel that can be used for transportation. I think it's interesting because we know that waste is a problem. And it's also interesting that the waste, the concentration of waste also happens to lie where the greatest need of fuels is at the same time. So if you were to look at the map right now, you'll see that where there is actually waste is where some of the greatest demand for fuel is. Additionally, Raven has the advantage that we are actually doing projects in California. We've been able to take advantage of the Hydrogen Valley project, and we're a receiver of one of the grants from the European Union, and we'll be developing a project in Spain. We have projects that we're developing in France and in Great Britain. We have another project we're developing in Singapore, as well as Japan and South Africa. So Raven is actually actively promoting projects, frankly, quite around the world. The other advantage that I forgot to mention, but it's worth mentioning, is that although we are electrically powered, we can generate our own electricity inside the fence. So we don't need to hook up to the grid. We can produce our own power by processing additional biomass within the process, either putting it into a solid oxide fuel cell and having absolutely no emissions, or going into a generator and generating electricity that way. But it gives us the ability to produce fuel autonomously and independently, being off the grid and providing independent energy and energy security. We also create sustainable fuels in a market very close to where the need is, again, decarbonizing the entire chain, as well as benefiting local communities by creating jobs, improving air quality immediately where people live, as well as providing the fuels that will actually improve their air quality as well. One of the other elements that Raven is working on doing is also fabricating our own systems. We do have our own fab shop in California. We will be purchasing another one in North America. We intend to acquire a fabrication shop in Europe and then again in Asia so that we can actually pretty much be at the steering wheel and control the supply chain of our equipment. In general, we can actually fabricate a system in about 12 months. Permitting is going to be another question, but the longest lead item we have is either going to be a hydrogen compressor or our second stage reformer. And so we can actually have a lot of partnerships, as you can see on this slide, that are actually making Raven a stronger organization. Raven has benefited and is privileged to have a lot of different partners in this space. We have been signing MOUs to provide sustainable aviation fuel for several airlines, both in Europe and North America, as well as building strategic partnerships with suppliers of important equipment so that we can get to market quicker and as inexpensively as possible. It's Raven's goal to produce clean fuels at a very competitive price locally and at the same time cleaning that environment. Thank you. I think I'm within the time and I appreciate everybody's attention. Have a nice afternoon.